in so that we have you on our list. We have a list of about 75 people to talk about, to keep people up to date on this particular program, the Caring Through Dementia program. We are finishing today 7 months? Yeah, 7 months of programming with regard to this network now that we call it Caring Through Dementia Network. Wanted to continue to provide information, give you a chance to meet some of the wonderful service providers that are here in this community and learn about this particular disorder. Some of you have probably seen a newspaper article this morning about the international study that's been done on the prevalence of Alzheimer's dementia. So we are working with something that's very important. Is that what we need to say? And a growing population. With that, I also need to say that we are going to take the month of August off. So we will not be meeting these next two. Usually we're meeting on the second and fourth Thursday of the month. So we are taking August off. We will start back again on September 14th. So that's the schedule here, and then I will keep you in touch. I will send you an email as soon as I have the information about our presenter for September 14th. Good afternoon and welcome. Good to see you. So with that, I also just want to say I'm very excited that we are, as a congregation, planning to start Memory Cafe here at this church in November. Now, we've been working with Pima Council on Aging. They are willing to train us and provide some financial assistance to get that program started. We felt like that one of the reasons for starting this, it is at Posada Life. It's free at Posada Life on Saturdays once a month. We thought that another opportunity to do this in Green Valley, and since some people think that La Posada is only for La Posada residents, Posada Life is actually for the community. So anyway, we are now in that process, and we will be looking for volunteers who would be willing to help with the Memory Cafe. We do have that training set up. That date is October 10th with Pima Council on Aging, so if you're interested in being a part of that, we'd love to have other churches partner with us, and we are in conversation with some of the churches now so that it could be a church-sponsored Memory Cafe. Memory Cafe is a socializing experience. It's a way of bringing people with memory issues together with their caregivers, their family members, their friends, to socialize, to break down some of the barriers of communication, and to have fun. And I went to a Memory Cafe on Saturday over at Posada Life. A couple I was with, they're very isolated, they live out in the country, and she told us, my husband doesn't talk much at home. He talked like a blue streak. And we had a great time. We had a lot of fun. The theme was summer at the beach. So, we got to tell stories about growing up with summer at the beach. And I thought we should have sung Beach Boys, but we didn't. The pitch is always too high anyway. But we did play beach volleyball. So, in chairs, sitting in chairs. So it was a lot of fun. So anyway, just to let you know that we're very excited about that, this ongoing relationship with Pima Council on Aging. So with that, I'm delighted to introduce Cynthia Wolcott and her work with Final Solutions. Is that right? No, that's Final Seasons.
It's up on the screen here.
Okay, so can you cut that out of the video, please? Okay, with that, I will introduce Cynthia, and we will be in good hands. She'll introduce you later.
I'm going to turn this one off, and I've got this one. So thank you for having me. And like you said, Cynthia Wolcott, Final Seasons LLC, and it's a new business that I've recently started here in Green Valley because I've seen the need. And there are so many people from that first catastrophic event, that first fall, that first diagnosis, until they qualify for hospice, that there's this huge gap of services. So I decided, I've worked hospice work for 25 years, and I decided that it was time for me to leave that corporate world that was tying my hands and keeping me from doing a lot of what needs to be done. And so I went out on my own, or I make my own rules, and I'm covering the needs, not just what somebody in a corporation tells me I can or can't do. So that's where I started. I started with Silver Springs, and I was working hospice there, and they saw such great outcomes with their residents that the administrator there said to me, have you ever thought about doing this for people that aren't on hospice? Coming in and working with them. And I thought, hadn't even considered it. Hospice has been my world for 25 years. So I decided that, went home and got to thinking about that, and I thought, that could work. So instead of retiring, which I should have done, I started a business, and I'm really excited about it. We've been at it for about 3 months now, working out of my home, but what I do is come to the homes, to the facilities. I have a couple of patients in Prestige Assisted Living, and I have a couple in Silver Springs. So I go to facilities also, but mostly going to the homes to help people with loneliness, being overwhelmed, not knowing where to get the answers. I have a plethora of information in this brain that I love to share. One of the things that I brought with me today, was this after-death guidance. And it's information that talks about what to do before you lose someone. And it also gives us some thoughts on preparing our end-of-life plans. The things that we need to do to better prepare our loved ones, for dealing with our stuff afterwards. And I think one of the main reasons I did that was because my sister passed away a year ago. And she had nothing in order. This is a social worker's sister, and she was an RN with hospice. And she had nothing prepared. And so that was one of my missions with putting together this packet, was to give that vital information so that people can prepare ahead of time and know what they need to do. And then after the fact, when you're hit with all of this, it's not as much of a shock because you know what to expect. So that's one of the handouts I have today. I've got to stay away from that speaker. Just reminded me. So Final Seasons LLC, that's my primary focus today, is just educating you on what I do, how I can benefit you, as a service to this community. And I have a faith-based background. I'm a Christian. So everything that I do, is led by that. And that's every day I pray, bring the people that need that support. So, it's my prayer every day. So, one of the things that I read here recently was solo aging. Damn it, I'm going to move away from that speaker. He's trying to, I don't want to stand in front of people. I'll stand over here. I guess I don't need to be in there. So, aging in place, that's the primary focus. Is keeping people at home, keeping people where they're safe. If home is not an option, then I can help with that too, because I have connections with lots of different resources in the community, for helping to work placements and additional supports. I missed a slide, no? So loss of a spouse, that's another big one that brings me on board, is loneliness, being isolated, being a caregiver, knowing that it's kind of like being home with that 3-year-old that you aren't having a conversation with every day, and you'd love to see another human being that could have a conversation with you, and understand where you're at. So that caregiver. Children miles away is another reason that I'm on board a lot, because I'm able to keep that connection between their loved one and them, just miles away. And so I found that that's one of the greatest values in what I do, is helping to connect these families with what's going on with their loved ones. Having no children at all, another huge issue, here in Green Valley is people that have lost their spouses, have no children, no family close by, they've lost. And then friends that have passed away. So many of us have outlived everyone. And so, especially in Green Valley. So that threat of loneliness, that threat of being by yourself, and it increases the risk for the following. Dying prematurely. That article today on Alzheimer's said that 70% of the people 70 and older that are caregivers die before their loved one. 70%. I couldn't believe that number today. So that's the risk because of the level of stress that we're under. So those supports, bringing in the people that can help to give you a break so you can get out to things like this, the social groups. Increased high blood pressure, obesity, because we're sitting at home and not doing all of the things we always did. Elder abuse, because we're frazzled to the edge of our last nerve. And overwhelmed with everything, and that's huge. So, and learning new skills. Through the 25 years of hospice work, I've worked with a lot of communities, a lot of dementia, and there are a lot of things out there that different people can bring onto the scene. And like he was talking about with the group that they're talking about starting here, you can learn so much from each other, and by interacting and learning those skills. So here's a testimony. So 77, I'm trying to make adjustments in outlook and attitude. So many questions about how I'll find safety and security, not knowing if my money will last or how I'll maintain my good health. It seems overwhelming, and yes it is, compounded by the reality that I am also alone or a caregiver, totally responsible. What I hope for most are meaningful friendships, kindness from others. So that support, having that emotional support system. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in Idaho and Washington State. My license has expired, so I'm working under a coaching umbrella. So I do a lot of coaching with my clinical background, which helps when we're traveling this journey, to have someone that knows how to manage it. So perhaps this individual had a strong family unit, but over time, it lessened or evaporated. Children moved away or became estranged. Spouses and partners separated, divorced or died. The siblings lost touch or died as well. This sounds like a real positive reinforcement here, doesn't it? It's the reality of the world we're living with right now. Single women often prefer living alone, but that's not to say they don't want or need help from friends and peers to share interests and activities. And even more, to have someone that they trust to assist to discuss the problems and the decisions. I set up a lively alert with a lady that's living alone today and dealing with chronic pain. So, I was concerned about her. She was calling me every day to let me know that she's okay. And we've got that check-in system in place, and I'm seeing her 3 times a week. But there was still that concern. She's had 2 falls recently. So, who's checking on her? I have another lady that I brought on board, 85 years old, perfectly healthy, active with the GVR, active with the singles group, very involved in everything. But she thought, what if something happens? Nobody will know. And who's going to take care of my cat? And that was her big concern, was her cat. And she says, what if I break down on the highway? Who do I call? She recently lost a brother, and that was her only connection, here. So she brought me on board, and we have minimal involvement. I see her once a week for that emotional support. And then she texts me every night before she goes to bed. I'm in, I'm safe, everything's good. And, she feels comforted knowing that somebody is aware. If she didn't call, would come and check on her. She went to the Eagles here a couple of Saturday nights ago, and she forgot to text me. So Sunday morning, I'm on the phone, You know, when I get out of church, if I don't hear from you, I'm going to be on your doorstep. And so she did call me after I got out of church, after two more telephone calls. And she was fine. She just got home late and forgot. So building that support team, you know, it's vital. And who should be in the support team? You know, family if possible, of course, is our best resource. You know, close friends, neighbors, those people. My aunt is in Missouri, out in the rural Missouri, and her husband passed away from Alzheimer's. She had a AFib. She didn't have a plan B. I tell everyone that I work with, especially with Alzheimer's patients, when you're that caregiver, have a plan B. What happens if something happens to me? You know, who do we call? What do we do? And so with her, she didn't have a plan B. So she was taken off in an ambulance, and the paramedics had to stay with him because they couldn't leave him alone until they found someone, you know, that could come and take care of him. So we all need a plan B, and that's important for us to have. And that's something that if you wanted to see me for just 1 or 2, we could do advanced directives. We could just come up with a plan B. How do we get those things in order? So, and then church supports, neighbors. Neighbors, that's the main thing. You know, does someone have a key to your house? If they don't see the garbage can, I had a neighbor. Her garbage can didn't come out, and it always did. And so 2 neighbors, a neighbor and I got together, and we thought, you know, so we called the sheriff's department. They came, they checked, house was locked up tight, everything looked good, everything looked fine. So they just left. Nothing they could do. And so another day went by, and my neighbor and I are freaking out. You know, something's going on here. So we did some networking. We found somebody up that used to work with her up in Tucson, and she just happened to have a key. So she came down, let us in. She'd been laying on the floor for 3 days with a broken wrist and defecated all over herself. And so 3 times I found her in that situation. I did put a lockbox outside her house with a code on it, and there were 2 of us that knew the code. And so if she didn't answer her phone or I didn't hear from her, I let myself in and checked on her. And 2 other incidences like that. She's at Garden Plaza now, you know, in a safe environment. And that's where she needed to be, you know, someplace where someone could be keeping an eye on her. And church supports are vital. You know, my church family, I didn't have a strong biological family, you know, for my lifetime. So my church family was my family. And I traveled from Michigan to Arkansas, to Washington, to Idaho. And every place I went, I had a church family. They're the ones that helped us pack. When I was in Arkansas, my husband was dying, and I needed to get back to Washington. Church family from Michigan flew out to drive us back to Washington State while we were in Arkansas. So the church family is what has always come together for me. And that's the greatest support we can have, you know, is connecting with our church. And then professional supports. Church is also another professional support. You know, the hospice agencies, the home health agencies, facilities, you know, people that can work with you on a plan. Prestige is here today, and I know that Julie goes out and talks with people about a plan, you know, so that when things decline and it gets to be more, then we've got you on a waiting list. We've got you ready to do what needs to be done to get a transition happening quickly and smoothly. So those things are important. I'm standing right in front of you. So that's what I do. You know, so it's assistance in the home. It's providing whatever supports. I went into a home the other day, and the gentleman was crying. And he says, my dog messed his bottom and I can't fix it. I don't need this dog. He's my love, but I don't need him. I can't take care of him. So I ended up putting him in the sink, washing his bottom and trimming his hair, you know, with his hair clippers. So I thought, okay, not exactly in my job description, and not something I want to do every day. So we set up a mobile groomer for him, you know, to get the resources that he needs. So those are the types of things I have in my portfolio of people. It's that traveling hairdresser, that traveling groomer, that podiatrist that comes out and visits homes. You know, all of these people that provide these services that are available to you may not always be covered by insurance, but are available. I'm not covered by any insurance. I'm direct pay, but my rates are very reasonable. And I bill monthly because I don't want to do that continual, someone told me, oh, you can make $60,000 a month by billing 15-minute increments. You know, that's not what I want to do. I want to help people. I don't want to hinder them with high costs. So I have a minimal fee, you know, that I charge, and it's very reasonable. That may change a little bit because my granddaughter's moving up here to partner with me. This business has grown so much that I can't do it all now. And there are so many needs here so she's coming up and going to partner with me. She's been in long-term care and she's an accountant. So she can do my billing. So I'm very thankful, you know, for that. And the overhead projection here, I've got a handout for those things that you just saw. You probably remember it in your mind. And then I got this through a Wisdom Circle out of La Posada. I get their newsletter. And it's a little thing that they talked about, and it says, each and every morning offers you a chance to start anew, fresh, and begin again. Each morning we wake, should we choose to listen to a message from the Creator, or remember the privilege that we've been given to wake up. It's a reminder to get up and to prepare ourselves, to honor the self, to go out into the world, to connect with Mother Earth and the hearts of others, brings to inspire and encourage those who cross our paths, and most importantly, to enjoy life. My goal every day is to put a smile on somebody's face, each and every person that I cross. And I make it a point to make eye contact with each and every person that walks by my path, and I speak. Because everyone needs to feel it. They need to know that they're cared about. And that's a huge part of what I do. Another thing that I want to discuss, there's the feedback again, life care planning. You know, things that we all need to think about. And I'm hoping that each and every one of you have already put this in place for your loved one, you know, that you're caring for. These are not in here, but all you have to type in is MPOA, Medical Power of Attorney, or Life Care Planning Packet on the website, and you can get the whole packet. It's a little daunting to look at the whole thing, but it's a fairly easy process because there are 4 things that are important: your living will, your advance directive, your medical power of attorney, who would you like to speak for you if you're unable to speak for yourself, and your spouse may not always be available, so who's that plan B, you know, if that doesn't happen. So these are vital, and you won't believe how many people have not even thought about it. You know, one lady, I asked her if she made any funeral arrangements, and she says, hadn't thought about it, 95 years old. Hadn't thought about dying. I said, did you think you were going to live forever? She says, no, I didn't think I was. This is another one, my end of life decisions. And this is a compassion choices handbook. And they really go into detail, you know, with every wish, and they have a lot of questions in here. This is a controversial topic because it's about right to die. And so, you know, this is the people that are involved with this one. And so, but it's a great thing to think about. We will be seeing them on our ballots, and we need to know what our position is on that, because we'll have to vote at some point on do we want that choice. You know, I recently took a gentleman to California. He wanted that choice, and so I assisted him with finding another assisted living, setting himself up with a hospice, and coordinating that. He ended up dying of natural causes because sepsis set in and he wasn't able to to make that choice, but he knew that he wanted to have that choice. So it's something that you need to search your hearts about and pray about, because at some point we'll have to make a decision, voting wise. Any questions about final seasons? By the way, it's final seasons, plural. That doesn't mean that bringing me on means we're ending our life. That means that we're in multiple seasons of this journey. And just like we have multiple seasons, summer, spring, fall, winter, we have many, many seasons of our life. And so, this is a huge, huge part, is knowing that it's seasons.
Where are your handouts? Because I was late.
They're on the table here.
Okay.
Yes. And then there's also email. He'll email the PowerPoint once I figure out how to send it to him. Because it's on Apple, and Apple never wants to share with anyone else. Yes, they get ugly. So, any other thoughts on, yes?
You picked up 2 documents there, and the one underneath the top, that second one down,
Yes.
what did you say you look under that one?
Medical power of attorney, MPOA. All you have to do is type in.
Care choice.
Yeah, this one is, your life care planning.
Okay, okay.
You can have that one if you want.
Oh, thank you.
And then you can share it with your friends,
I sure have.
if there's questions about it, or someone's. But it's under Arizona, and if you just type in MPOA, it will bring it up, and then just go on to Arizona's website. And the packet is there, and you can just print it out. I didn't print them out because there's so many pages, and it gets costly. And so that's available. I do have one other one here, that I can share if someone wants it, if they're not part of this group. Yes.
Part of the group. So.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions for me? As a caregiver, the most important thing you can do is take care of yourselves. Yes, sir.
You spent 25 years with hospice.
Yes.
How does hospice play in or help people with dementia?
It's difficult, and Kay is our expert in that field. She is our liaison. We are both currently with Charter Hospice. Kay talked me into going back and working Green Valley. She begged me, and I don't have the heart to tell her no. And so I'm the social worker for Charter Hospice down here in the Green Valley area. And so with my schedule, they're willing to work around my clients first, and then, we'll work in the assessments and so on after that. But so Kay is going to be up next. Oh, there's some of the things I offer. So there's my brochure. It's up here on the counter. You can help yourself to that. And then Charter Hospice. And Kay is going to tell you more about that, and how you qualify with dementia, and any other questions you might have regarding that. And we can both chime in on those questions. So I'll turn it over to Kayboone, and she's the liaison for Charter Hospice.
I have the utmost respect for what Cynthia is doing. How many of you are actual caregivers? So you have some. Did any of you see the movie 50 First Dates? Every morning was new, and they never knew what happened the day before. This girl did. And I'm sure that you as caregivers feel like you're living in the 50 First Dates movie, because every day they don't remember who they are or what they're doing, or they may have behaviors that happen. And, hospice is very well versed in all of that. So we come beside you and help you maneuver through this journey of not remembering things, some behaviors, and giving you our expertise of how to deal with it and how to care for it. And so let's talk a little bit about what hospice is, because there's a lot of misconceptions about what hospice does. And we want our patients to do as much as they can for as long as they can in comfort and safety. A a lot of people think that when you go on hospice, you're gonna lay down and you're gonna have to not get up and just die. That's not true, okay? And we don't go in there and kill you, okay? We just don't do that. I mean, for multiple reasons, it's against the law. And second of all, we're for profit. So the longer you stay on with us, then the better it is for us, right? But not only that, but, you know, we want to give our patients the dignity of living life to its fullest and coming along beside you caregivers to help you. So I'm going to give you an overview of what hospice does for you, okay? Hospice is a whole team, and our team consists of a medical director that oversees the whole program, and that's a doctor. He's at our beck and call 24 hours a day. So we can call him in the middle of the night for any orders that we need or any situations that our nurse may run into. We also have a nurse that would be assigned to the patient, and we try to keep that consistent so that it's not a new face every time, because we know what that's like. So we also have a CNA that can help you come in and help bathe them 2-3 times a week, whatever you guys need. And
What is a CNA?
a certified nursing assistant. So they'll come in and take care of the hygiene for you, maybe help you with changing your sheets or linens and such as that, doing little tasks. And then we have a social worker. And we also have a volunteer coordinator and a chaplain. So the only thing that's actually really required to be on hospice is a visit from a nurse at least once every 2 weeks. But we like to do it more often than that. So that nurse would probably come out 2 or 3 times, 1-2 times a week, unless they're declining or there's symptoms that they're trying to get under control. And then they will adjust it to whatever they need to do. And of course, as they're what we call actively dying, in that last week or so, we try to increase our visits to every day. And then our social worker as well will come in and help you. And chaplain, of course. Our whole team just kind of just loves on you and takes care of the whole family. As a matter of fact, we take care of the loved ones for 13 months after the passing, so that we can make sure that you're not in a bad part of grieving that you just can't get out of. You get stuck in that grieving process, and that's where our chaplain and our social worker come in strongly at. So we just want to make sure that the family is doing everything that possible, you know, to get through it. You never get over it, but you get through it. And we do it for 13 months because we want to make sure that we get through all the holidays, because those holidays are tough without your loved ones. So we make sure that we cover all of those holidays. So.
Let me talk a little bit about social work real quick.
Okay,
You
go ahead.
mentioned social work. So I tell everybody I take care of the head and the heart. You know, the nurses take care of the symptoms, the physical bodies, all of that. So I embrace the head and the heart, the things you're worrying about, the things that aren't done, the things you have questions about, the things you have concerns about. And then the heart, preparing for a loss, preparing for everything that you're dealing with, you know, during this journey of loss. And so a huge part of what we do, you know, is working on that. I think a lot of you are familiar with Green Valley Cares, and you've been to the meetings that we've been having. And Lynn Severe was one that I partnered with from her hospice journey after the loss of her husband. And she and I became very good friends through our journey. But now it's been over a year, and she's no longer on the hospice, but I'm texting her every day, sending her things on grief. And she had said something about having to get rid of some of her husband's clothes after a year. And she says, I still can't get rid of stuff. She says, but I put his socks and underwear in a bag. She says, I'm grieving over letting go of his socks and underwear. And so I've sent her things this week to help her cope with making that decision, you know, and yes.
Also a social worker, but my mother was in hospice and lived. Anyway, my mother was in hospice, and this was quite a few years ago, and we did not have all of those services that you're talking about. When she passed away, the nurse was there, the pastor came. They were there for the duration of her active death, and probably for about half an hour, 45 minutes after she passed. And after that, I went into her room and I lay on her hospital bed, and I just sobbed.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I knew what was going on, but you really, really have to have all of those folks around you to be able to get
Yes.
through what.
Yes, absolutely. And I read a book once that was, a lady had lost her daughter in a tragic accident. So she was a professor at a university, and she wrote this book, and she had gone around and interviewed other people that lost children. And in the process, she wrote this one part that really stayed with me. And she says, grief is like a thief in the night that breaks in and never leaves. Stays with you forever. You eventually get where you can come around the corner and it doesn't frighten you as much anymore. You're prepared to see it. You're prepared to know it's present. But, you know, it becomes a part of your family. You eventually ask them to sit down and join you for dinner. You know, you get that comfortable with your grief. So we never, ever lose our grief. And that's another presentation.
So, and it does stick with you. I've been through a lot myself over the last few years, being a mom. My brother, who was an instant death, because he got killed on a motorcycle. But the ones that you're expecting, even though you're expecting it to happen, I expected it with my sister, but even after it happened, it's like, it went so fast. It's been years, but it went so fast. And, you know, you don't ever really get rid of that grief. There's going to be something that triggers it, like the underwear and socks. It took me 3 years to get my room back together for my sister. No, 2 years, I guess. Year and a half. Anyway, you never get over that part of it. But because we watch over you, we want to make sure that you don't get stuck in one part of the grief.
Yeah, Kay, could you talk a little bit about intake, about, you know, how does somebody, in the process of getting enrolled,
So,
and what the criteria are?
yeah, so with a lot of people think that it's just imminently dying. Like, I get stories. If I go to a health fair, I'm going to have 2 different types of people that come to me. And one of them really doesn't come to me. They walk around me and said, I'm not ready for that yet. Or the other person that comes up and tells me a hospice story. And because they've had to experience it. So it's not just cancer, and it's not just an imminent death. What we look at is the criteria of what the dementia patient is going through and where they are in that stage, because as we all know, it can go on for a very long time. So the things that we're looking for is, are they incontinent? Both bowel, bladder, maybe just one or the other. They can't make it to the bathroom, or they go into the bathroom and urinate in the corner. We also look at their weight and how they're eating, because you know, they kind of go through a stage where they might not be eating very much, and they can still feed themselves. Or they can be like a toddler and they'll just do finger food. So we look at that criteria, or if somebody actually has to feed them. So we look at all of that, and we also see how they're ambulating. Do they use assistance to ambulate? Are they bedbound? Are they a 1 or 2 person assist to get to the toilet?
Frequent falls.
Yeah, and frequent falls, as she said, and hospitalizations. I mean, and repeat UTIs. We look at all of that stuff and see, do they actually meet that criteria? Medicare is very strict on their guidelines for us, and they tell us that these things have to be met. So if we see some of these things popping up, then it's time for us to do an assessment on the patient and see if they do qualify. So if you see any of this with any of your patients, that they're falling a lot, or they're not eating well, and they're losing weight, and you saw them 2 weeks ago, and how their clothes are just hanging on them, that's a good indication that it's time for me to come out and see them. So I'm the one that gets the ball rolling. I get the team started. I talk to the family. I talk to, I gather the medical information, all the health records, and we have to have it ordered from a physician or a nurse practitioner. So once we get that order for evaluation and treat for hospice, then I can go out, I can send a nurse out to, if it's kind of a questionable thing, like they're teetering between being qualified or not being qualified, I can send a nurse out and they can do an assessment as well. If it's very obvious, then pretty much we just go on with it and just do the admission. Yes?
What is the difference between palliative care and hospice care? Because the state I'm from, they were very distinct differences, and people would go between the two, but our state was very clear on what was criteria for palliative and what's the criteria for hospice, and they did not.
Yeah, so palliative and hospice kind of are lined up to some degree. Now, palliative care, you can continue to seek aggressive treatment for your cancer or whatever it is, but you don't get the whole team. And you'll have a nurse that'll come out, or a nurse practitioner that'll come out and just prescribe things for you, not really do a lot of testing on you, but it's also like a bridge from palliative, from being okay to palliative to hospice. I always like to say, hospice, you get a whole team. Things aren't going to get a lot better, and you might as well have the whole team. You paid into it through your Medicare Part A. It's paid at 100%. Medicare Part A is your hospitalization, so it just switches from the hospitalization benefit to the hospice benefit. If you don't decline while you're on there, we have to do assessments once every 90 days, then the second 90 days, and then every 60 days after that. There has to be even just a small decline in there for us to be able to keep them on, or else I can put Cynthia on and let her stay on for years.
And I love the care.
She likes attention.
Okay, just to be clear, you're talking about once you've been accepted as a hospice patient, you've met the criteria, then there's an evaluation every 90 days.
Yes, a nurse practitioner.
Is that true for palliative care too?
Palliative care does not have to have that.
Okay.
But we're so governed by what Medicare laws are.
Right.
So to answer your question, I kind of see palliative care as a bridge to hospice care for people who are trying to adapt to the thought of doing this
It is. Also, the difference is that palliative care is relatively available for people who are not on Medicare, because oftentimes hospice and Medicare is together in the sense of financial support and payment. Palliative care is not, and I'm speaking from the state I'm coming from. I'm not familiar with Arizona. I don't even know if they recognize palliative.
So
They're just
so the
starting.
care, the palliative care is built under the Medicare Part B, or like your insurance company,
Right.
okay?
And hospice is also. Hospice for people that are not eligible for Medicare is also covered by their primary
Insurance.
insurance.
Right, right.
Or Medicaid,
Right.
yes. Palliative care allows
I
treatments.
thought there was restrictions on how long you can get hospice. From the state I am, you can only be there for so many months, and if there isn't any change in your status quo, then they have to go back to palliative.
And
then
that's
they-
exactly what I was saying. So
Right.
remember the 90 days,
Right.
60? So, and as long as you have somewhat of a decline on there, I've had patients be on hospice for years.
My husband was on for 2.5 years,
Exactly.
and he had COPD, so he was up here when we got on hospice, and then he would have an exacerbation of pneumonia, and then he would be down here, and then he would get back almost where he was before, and then he would have a little episode, and, so eventually, 2.5 years later, but he continued to show, he never got back to baseline and never stayed there. So, those continual changes. Palliative care, you can continue with treatments, you can go to the hospitals, you can do, all types of additional care. With hospice, Medicare recognizes that by bringing the big guns in, providing all of these services in home, we're going to keep you out of the emergency room in the hospitals. So they save money in the long run, by bringing the care into the home.
And taking someone, especially with Alzheimer's, into the hospital all the
Yeah.
time and being in an unfamiliar place,
An ambulance.
and usually it hurts more than it helps, because they're at a point where the hospital really can't do much to help them. And so you get them in that situation, then they may come home with behaviors or...
And what I share with each of my families when I talk to them about hospice, what do you gain in these doctor's appointments? What are your physicians doing for you? Well, I don't know, they write scripts. Well, hospice physician can write scripts. Well, they do tests. Well, what are you going to do if the test comes out positive? Are you going to do anything about it? No. I'm not going to have surgery. I'm not a candidate for any of that. Well, then why are we going through all of this? Why are we putting our loved ones through all of this? When there is no benefit other than paying the BMW payment for the physician you're seeing, So look at the gain for each and every visit. What are we, and physicians are wonderful, and I am a proponent for seeing your physician and making sure that you're cared for. But I think that we're prolonging life way too long, by doing things that are not giving us quality of life. And I personally am a DNR. I do not want to be resuscitated, and I tell everybody if I get that close to being in the arms of Jesus and you bring me back, I'm going to be upset. So, I don't want to be brought back, because the odds are I'm not going to be as good as I am now.
I just say a brief story. My brother was an endocrinologist, an MD, and I imagine during his years of practice, he probably did not refer people often enough to hospice.
Absolutely.
But when he got pulmonary fibrosis, and in the last, then he was put on hospice, and he said the nurses were angels. They were absolute angels. It was just a life-saving, not a life-saving because he died, but it was a very much a healing experience for him to have that kind of level of care. So thanks be to God for hospice.
So the reason why I keep doing this for many years is when I leave somebody's home and the family's just distraught about what's going on and coming to grips with the failure of their loved one. When I leave, most of the time I get a hug and they tell me that they're relieved. They're relieved that they have somebody to call in the middle of the night. They're relieved that somebody's going to help them go through the decision-making through this. And so I keep doing it because I feel like it helps. And
You mentioned your brother-in-law that was the
And
physician.
my brother.
Brother. There's a book, At Peace. And I would like for each and every one of you to download it or buy the book. It's from Samuel Harrington, an MD. And it talks about his journey with his mother and dad and choices and, thinking about end of life. But it's an amazing book. And it's At Peace. So it has these little half moons on the top, when you see them. But it's a great book, and everyone should read it, at this season of our life, so we can be thinking about those things. The only complaint, 25 years of hospice work, and I'm not saying that all hospices are equal, because I've worked for several, and some of them I didn't work for very long. So they're not all created equal, and you have the right to choose. You have the right to fire them if they're not doing what your expectations are for them. Of course, go to them, try to mediate whatever the concern is, talk to the supervisor. But remember that you can sign it takes 20 signatures to get in, that Medicare requires, but it only takes one to get out. And so you can transfer to another hospice. You can revocate if you choose. Nothing is written in stone. I'm probably jumping ahead of you.
that's okay.
Nothing is written in stone, so, you can change your mind after that first couple of weeks. If you decide it's not what you want, then you can change your mind and you can go on about life as usual. So, just because you sign on the dotted lines doesn't mean that it's written in stone. So,
Yes.
Do you ever get a sense of when the person is going to die?
So
Yes.
there's clues. There's clues that physically are happening and, outside of just a heart attack that's sudden or...
your cat will tell you. Your cat will tell you, or your dog will tell you quicker than anyone.
They'll eat you too. When it comes out, you-
Because they identify. A cat in a facility will identify with someone that's in those last hours, and they will go and lay with them.
Well, I had a friend whose mother went into hospice at a local nursing home, and they came in the morning and treated her, the hospice people did, and they looked at her and they said, your mother's going to be dead by about 1 o'clock. And she was dead by 1 o'clock.
We have criteria, and of course, traveling 25 years, I've sat at a lot of bedsides. And we can recognize, we call it active. I tell all of my patients, when you hear the nurse say your mother is active, then you know you're within 24 to 48 hours of passing. And so that's the terminology we use, is active status. And then when someone is active, I'm called in on a daily basis. The nurse case manager is called in on a daily basis. So if you start seeing our faces on a daily basis, these people should have had conversations with you about where you are in the journey and what to expect.
It was my best
We
friend.
have Nancy Carnes has a little book called Gone From Your Sight. And it talks about the months, the weeks, the days, and the hours before a death. And she clearly outlines what to look for. And I bring those in faithfully.
What was the name of the book again?
It's Gone From Your Sight by Nancy Carnes. And all of the hospices usually bring them in those last days to prepare you for fear of the unknown is what's scary.
And
If
everybody...
you know what to expect.
Yeah, everybody wants to know,
Yes.
when
if
am I
you-
going to die?
If you know what to expect, if that family member's talking about it. Another thing that's a pet peeve of mine is families say, oh, don't tell them don't tell them you're hospice. Don't have the conversation, about dying. And, these people want to talk about it. They want to make peace with whatever's going on in their life. And so when you open up that door and you have that conversation with your loved one, you know, Mom, I think your time is pretty close.
And they know it.
And they know it.
No, this
And they
person
want to
was out.
talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, those last hours. she
Those
will
last
be out.
hours,
Yeah,
they
she
know.
was out there. And they also gave her morphine in
We
class.
medicate. Morphine is the best drug for end of life.
Yeah.
People say, oh, well, you're going to come in and give them morphine and kill them. No, you know, that's not the case. What we do is we give them morphine so their bodies can relax and they can transition.
I see.
And it also helps with the breathing.
Breathing,
It helps open their
meds.
The morphine, just so you know, is small doses,
Very.
very small doses over a longer period of time. They also give you scopolamine, which is also helps with
The fluid.
relaxation and so forth, the patch. So there's all kinds of very gentle drugs. I think what I have told patients when I was at the bedside is talk to them, because the last sense is hearing. So they need music, prayers, whatever their wishes are. I had a patient once who wanted to hear cowboy music. He wanted cowboy music because for him that was very, and certain songs he wanted to be played over and over again. So what families don't realize is that they sit there and they watch their loved one decline when they should be there talking to them,
What would you like?
sharing the memories, allowing them to forgive. Sometimes we don't allow family members to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I did or whatever. They need to do that. That's part of that
Absolutely.
transition.
And that's why having that open communication
Right.
about death, we all need to be comfortable with death. None of us are going to get out of here alive. I guarantee it.
And I have to agree with you about the hearing as the last sense.
It is the
We
last
did,
sense.
yeah. I had a patient that we do veterans honoring, and he was pretty much out of it, just laying there. And during that process of us doing the veterans honoring, our volunteer coordinator would put on the music of whatever service he was on, and I looked over and a tear was rolling out of his eyes. Not responsive, that tear came. So
He knew.
he knew what we were doing. And so talk to them.
And I encourage families to go in one at a time, make your peace. And then everybody go in and laugh. Go in and talk about the fun times. Remember, Dad, when that such and such happened, or, you know, and laugh in his presence. Even though he's dying, it's okay. You know, it's okay to have joy in those moments too, because we have great memories.
I don't want to go any longer. If you guys, do you have any questions though?
Would you be available to hang around so people could?
I would,
Okay,
yeah.
that would be super.
And I'm honored that you asked us to come. Thank
Thank
you.
Glad
you.
that you came. Thank you so much. So thank you, everybody, for coming, and we'll see you on September the 14th.
Oh, and by the way, there's some of these on the desk over here, and it's what we're looking for a lot of the disease processes and what we actually look for.